Spring fishing season is just around the corner, and Border Sporting Goods is your fishing headquarters for rods and reels from G. Loomis, St. Croix, Fenwick, Lewes, Daiwa, Shimano, and Abu Garcia. No matter what species of fish you are targeting, Borders has the perfect setup to make your next trip on the water a success. Borders has baits in every style and size with a wide selection of tackle from Berkley, Strike King, Zoom, Z-Man, Bandit, and many more. Before hitting the water for your next fishing trip, stop by and stock up at Border Sporting Goods, US 60 West in Ashland. And welcome into Casting with the Coaches. He's Evan Ferguson. I'm James Carter. Presented by Border Sporting Goods. Had a little bit of a small break there after our line episode because Evan's been off actually fishing, where the rest of us has been sitting back watching fishing. But we're going to talk about his tournament. He fished his first Bass Open out at Lake Ouachita in Arkansas. And we're going to look at the weather and kind of start thinking about that transition period that's about to start happening because as we were talking just a little bit ago, we're probably about this close of fishing starting to really come on. I was actually looking yesterday. I said, when does the time change? March 10th. And that's not too far away. So we're about 3 weeks away from that time change. And I was looking yesterday. It was like 6:30, and there was still enough daylight outside that you could probably still be fishing for just a little bit.
Yeah, I actually thought I started doing the math in my head if I could start fishing after school a little bit more. I was like, if I drive, we got 3:35. If I drive, so it's that time of year. We're definitely itching. I got to get on the water this last weekend, and it was a great time. But it's ready around here too. I mean, it is really really close. We've talked about that, all the stuff about wintertime fishing and stuff all year. Well, it's finally time to start talking about the good time. The pre-spawn, and these fish are wanting to go towards the bank now, and let's time to go fishing.
Well, before we get rolling again, there's our social media stuff and the information for us, both of us there on Instagram. We've got both of our stuff on it there. And the one thing I wanted to point out too is roll back real quick. A big thanks to all of the viewers out there that took a look at our line episode. Our most viewed video that we've put out so far in all the episodes. Got some great feedback on it. And it was certainly eye-opening without a doubt. So we greatly appreciate that. Again, continue subscribing. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Hit that bell. We'll try to get back on our regular rotation here and so forth. But, Evan, that was really interesting, again, all the data that we put together. And then I was actually out at the Borders open house this past weekend and had a chance to discuss some stuff with one of the reps out there. And he actually gave me some ideas and some stuff if we do it again. So part 2 at some point may be coming, maybe next fall, whenever we need some stuff in the wintertime. But some interesting stuff that he kind of pointed out. And it was kind of a thing that I really never really thought about when you're looking at line, but it was some really interesting thing to go with.
Well, I'm excited to actually hear what he had to say about it, because there's definitely some things I've thought about too with it that would change it, but it was really some interesting data. And I know I was fishing around a lot of rocks this last weekend, and I retied a lot more than I used to, just because I kept having it in my head about, what we realized the strength test and the abrasion tests. Then I really had a lot of, if I'd been hooked in a tree and tried to pull or something, I don't know, just I retied probably more than I had in a long, long time, and knock on wood, but I didn't have any break off. So I think if anything you take away is retie your line often, and it'll give you a lot more peace of mind for sure.
Well, let's talk about your event, your first Bass Open. I know you've kind of been really excited about this, of trying to take your career to the next level or so forth. But a really good tournament. Unfortunately, you didn't cash, but you came to the weight or the weight came to the scales both days with limits, not big limits, but you got 5, and that's the most important thing starting off.
Yeah, it was definitely something I've always wanted to do. So I was really glad I was able to have the opportunity to go fish this event. And I think, you always look at these lakes and you think, oh, well, we fish around where we're at, and surely we can go down there and just wear them out. But you're fishing also, not only you're fishing against a fish, number one, but you're also got, 200 other of the best anglers out there in the world. And so, I saw guys that, I've always seen on TV, and it was a really cool, experience for me to get, sit beside, like on day one for Blast Off, like Cliff Pace is, beside me. He won a classic a couple, not too long ago. And that's pretty cool to see guys like that around you. You had a lot of really great anglers there. And like you said, I would like to have got the win or finished up in the money, but so would everybody else. I was able to, it kind of was something I always wanted to be able to say if I could compete or if I just am truly always in my dreams at that level. And I think that I proved a little bit to myself that I can catch 5. The way I'm going to practice for the next one is going to be a little bit improved. I feel like I definitely learned some things about myself and learned about how to practice and continue to be versatile. So it was cool. I had to grind. I didn't have an easy spot to go catch 5 or an easy. So there's a lot of fishing by the seat of my pants, junk fishing and moving around. And I was able to get the 5, and I just never got a big bite. And that was in fishing. At some point, you have to get a bite, and especially when they were catching, a 10-14 was weighed in, a 9-14 was weighed in. The 10-14 guy, good amount, he was like, well, I also had a 5 that day too. So, whenever you're able to get fish like that, it kind of makes your 2-pounders and your 2.5-pound fish seem a little less meaningful. But at the same time, you really need to get on that consistent 3-pound bite average. And I couldn't get over that consistent 2-pound average. And you saw that by my weights, and it is what it is. I was just right around 2 pounds with about every fish I had for the entire tournament, and including practice. So I definitely need to figure out ways to, I saw fish. It was really cool. I want to, if you don't mind me ramble for a little bit longer about this. Where we're from, we don't have a lot of hydrilla, and this lake was full of hydrilla. And you would have, I mean, on my live scope, I'm looking at, and I'm seeing just giant fish just swim through this hydrilla. And like you would catch something and see some, and some of them were definitely bass, but then you'd also catch a drum, like a giant drum. You catch giant stripers that were mixed in with it. I caught like 4 or 5 over 2-pound crappie. And I mean, just it, it just really, and I caught pickerel, I caught walleye, and there was so many fish in this grass. And I mean, the guy who won, Jeremy Kinder, he was rattle trapping through the grass and ripping it out. And apparently he just knew the secret. I mean, he was able to figure out that special cast and combination to get it done. I wasn't able to do that. But whenever you're looking at that many fish, it's hard to leave them. I mean, and there was bait there, and that lake didn't have balls of shad like we're used to. Like even at Gatesville at Grayson, like you're seeing shad everywhere throughout the lake. And that lake's super healthy, but you just don't see bait fish in it, and it just puzzled me. You'd see a little bit of areas where there was. It's unique how the different areas of the country fish different ways, and that was a very unique fishery to me. Now, to other guys, they're probably laughing at me saying this because they're like, "Yeah, that's how it is." But hydrilla was new to me. We don't really have a lot of that around here, and I think I mean, it was a different animal, and I was able to get them when they were schooling around it and stuff, but I couldn't get them down 12 foot of water, 12 to 15 feet, and I could not make them bite out of that hydrilla for nothing, but I could see them, and it was pure torture. I couldn't make them bite. So I'm going to figure out how to do that at some point and get better.
Well, one thing you pointed out too was day one, you had 2 fish. You didn't get your first bite till almost lunchtime, and then latter part of the day, you were in the end of the late flights, so you had a little bit of extra time to fish later in the day, and you were able to kind of run around and find a spot that you were able to go back to and just stick your nose down and go what you know what to do, and you found 3 fish to fill out your limit. But talk about the pressure that you had about after taking so long to get your first bite, And then you're an hour before weigh-in, and you still only have two in the box.
I tell you what, I've been on the sidelines in some stressful fourth quarter situations on Friday nights, and I would say it was a lot like it. I mean, there was a lot of different voices up in your head telling you like, I couldn't, I was really surprised I hadn't done it, and it wasn't the fact that I wasn't getting bites. I had lost 6 keepers, and it was just like ghosts just haunting me that I wasn't getting them in the boat that day. And that first day, like I said, I was boat 190. The first spot I planned on going to was more of a schooling spot. By the time I got there about 8 a.m., that activity was done, and I could not get them to fire at that point. And I scrambled around, and whenever I went back to my strength, I said, I'm a shallow guy. I like to get up on the bank, and I'll get the video on YouTube at some point of my GoPro catches. But whenever I was 2 foot off the bank throwing a crankbait just going paralleling it, and finally got my 3 other keepers in the boat. And you just thought I won the classic from my reaction. It was like a weight off my shoulders, but it kind of reminded me too to trust my strengths and fish how I like to. The guys who won, they do what they do, and they fish that way. And I might have been searching too much for the magic bite instead of just hopefully getting a better bite on what I do. So, of course, I'm not really a very good deep guy to begin with, and I think that lake, most of the guys you had guys fishing over 100 foot of water scoping, and then you had some guys like the guy who won was fishing grass lines and in under 15 foot, so about 10 foot of water. So the bite can be different for everybody.
Practice is a unique element when you're going for tournament fishing because one, you have to locate fish, and two, you have to make certain that there is something there that's going to make those fish stay in that spot. And on the backside of that, you want to make certain that these fish that you're going to commit to are going to hold up for enough to get you through 1, 2, 3 days, how many ever days that you're planning on fishing. And sometimes that becomes an issue because you may find a grouping of fish, but there's not going to be enough there to sustain for multiple days.
Yeah, you're right, and it's something that, and if a lot of those big areas, like you're fishing against 200 other guys, they're going to find the areas that have a lot of fish. So we'll maintain other guys fishing that similar area. I went by one cove, like I said on the first day. I was trying to get to my spot, and there was like 8 to 10 boats sitting on like one spot that was loaded with fish around this grassy like spawning pocket. I'm like, it's I mean, we talk about getting areas pressure to the lakes around here where we're from, but those areas also get pretty crowded too because there might be bigger lakes, but the fish are only using certain areas of that lake. And so, whenever you're putting a lot of boats in the water, they're going to get pressure and they're going to feel it. So, trying to find something off the beaten path is always effective. And turns out the most obvious bite, the shallow rail trap, was kind of not figured out by anybody else. And that's how the job got done.
You talk about what you have to do when you're preparing for a tournament, and it's very easy to show up and see this guy doing that or this guy doing this and get away from what your strengths are. And it's why I kid in the springtime, a lot of these tackle shops that's around lakes, they love whenever there's about 6 or 7 different bites going on because everybody floods and they want everything that what everybody's catching the fish on. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you start preparing for a tournament, especially if you don't go out and find a quick bite. And the next thing you know, you're doing things that are totally off the wall that's not your strengths.
Yeah, and it was hard. When I first got there, it was pouring the rain for 3 days straight, and like you can't run around hardly and like explore the lake when it's just beating rain. Like I don't know, you can, but it's how it feels. It's brutal, and I was out there doing it and trying to figure out water, but it just you couldn't go and see, and you couldn't be looking as you were running that well to see what's going on. But you're right, like there's other bites going on, and they like to always tell you like, hey, well, this guy's caught him on this jerk bait, but you might want to try this jig, but this crankbait's been on fire too. But if you got here and the swim bait bite's been working well too. So, and if you look at it, you can catch fish. They're just fish. You can catch them a lot of different ways. I mean, look at the baits on Bassmaster, what was effective, and you can catch them on anything. I think we get way too hung up on secretive baits. I mean, the guy who won was throwing booyah slash old Excalibur rattle traps all week, and then he kicks it in the lake the last day of his last one, and he picks up a different one and still wins the tournament on it. So to me, you tell me it's like, was it really the bait or was it the area and how you present it? I think that's what fishing is. It's your area and how you're presenting your cast and how you're fishing it in that area. That's what matters. I think the secret bait myth is, you know, it sells stuff for sure. And I mean, there's definitely sometimes I think there's some special things, but when you're going to places and you're trying to go fish from one lake to another lake and another lake, you don't have time to figure out the special bait. You got to do your baits that you trust and you know and fish them how you can.
Well, one of the things we're looking at now, we're in late February, and we got a little bit of kind of a taste here in the east area with some warm weather a couple weeks ago. Then we got some snow over the weekend. Now we're starting to warm back up, but spring is not too far away. And one of the things that you need to start thinking about, if you're going to start locating fish, I see a lot of people, they want to wait until April, May. And a lot of times, some of your bigger fish have already pushed in, spawned, and pushed back out. But if you can start finding those fish in March, even if they're not biting, but if you can start following them around, you can follow this group of fish the entire summertime. And it certainly makes fishing a lot easier when you're trying to locate those fish when the bite gets really tough in the summer.
It all revolves around the spawn and the bait. It's going to start with, right now you can find bait, but these fish are going to start staging up. They call them staging areas for a reason, near the best areas to spawn on the lake, and that's where you're going to catch your most fish for sure in those spawning areas. So you follow them out of the deep water to that spawning staging area, up in the spawn area, then they come back out. And I think, like you said, if once you figure out where a bass spawns in the lake, you can break that lake down, and you can kind of hopefully follow those fish. Now they may move up and down the water column, they may pull on the bank, they may move back off of it sometimes. But if you know that spawning areas, and especially in our smaller lakes around here, that kind of can be anywhere. And I think that makes it harder around here. There's bigger lakes, those spawn areas are way more like boom on a map. But around here, these lakes are, they can spawn all over the place. The main lake, coves, pockets, creeks, and so it kind of spreads them out a little bit more. But I think find that spawning pocket and follow it the rest of the year.
One of the things too, I think I picked this up from fishing up north. There's always a concept you think that spawning fish have to be super shallow. And I know a couple of years ago, I fished spawning fish at St. Clair in 16 feet of water. Now, I was looking at the fish, not on a live scope or on a graph. I was physically with my eyes looking at the fish. But again, when you have a clear water fishery, that sunlight can get to those fish and they can spawn in depths that 10, 20 feet. I've even seen some videos, some spotted bass before that they found them down 25, 30 feet. It's all about, can the sunlight get to it? Now, if you don't have clear water fisheries, that's probably not going to happen because it all evolves around enough sunlight getting into where the bedding fish are. But don't get caught up of thinking you got to be blowing mud with your trolling motor to try to find where these fish are going to be spawning.
No, you're definitely, they can be deep, and it's going to be your clarity is going to matter so much, and the time of year. Early in the year, the earliest spawners are going to be the shallowest spawners, and then the later in the year as it goes, typically the water clears up as it goes later in the year, but also the water's heating up, so it just has to be you don't have to be super hot for that water. They actually want to get it down to about 65 degrees, 60, so it might be deeper. And those fish, as long as that water is stable throughout the water column, they can be spawning as deep as they want to be. I've seen them deep at Grayson laying in a treetop, doing their thing in Eastland and stuff. Like there's some deep spawners around here in Yatesville too. So, it's, if you got clear water and that first wave, dirt, boom, and it just gets deeper and deeper as it goes.
Now, when you're starting to search for fish, one of the things that when I try to break down a lake, first thing I look for good points. Points that has the channels that swings close to it. And then those pockets that are close by that either has a secondary channel that runs back into it or a good creek or a ditch, if you will, that runs back into it. But also some secondary points to where there's some spots those fish can jump to back and forth as they start to travel if they want to go back in the back.
I mean, points are, they're kind of like highways. Like the challenge of the highways and the points are like your great stops or exits. I guess I look at it that way. So, um, yeah, I think that the points are a great topic on looking at, and I don't think the points and the channel swings are going to be where your water intersects in at. If you can find that point, go to that channel swing. It sets stuff up kind of to be where they're going to get off at. I look at it all as like a highway. I try to make it like a road when I do it in my head. So.
Now, the other thing too is don't overthink things. If you find a ball of bait, follow that bait. I've had people before, they say if the bait is there, you're basically wasting your time fishing. And I'm like, no, that's 100% the opposite direction. If you found the bait, the fish are going to be there. You just have to be able to trigger them with a reaction strike away from that bait.
Yeah, and I think with the forward facing sonar, you're literally just looking for bait balls. You see bait and you see the bass underneath of it, and you can watch them shoot up through them, bust it, and you know, once they're feeding, it's like they're schooling. It's like you catch fish schooling on top water, in the summertime or late fall, and in the fall, and you're like, oh, this is awesome. The same thing can happen. It's happening 20 foot down with your sonar. Just look out there and you see it happening. Throw out there with whatever, and that bait, the bass are gonna be there. You got to eat. I'm gonna be near some food too. I'm gonna find. I'm always near the kitchen. So
Now, another thing too, especially in this area where we live, and I'm sure there's lots of this that happens throughout the United States. The other thing you got to look at, especially in the springtime, the fluctuation of the water level with heavy rains and with the way that they're holding the lake and so forth. And something that's very key, I know with our area, is a lot of the lakes that we have here, they're for flood control. So during the spring, they can really fluctuate very high and low. And being able to find those fish that maybe you found and then the lake comes up or lake goes down, you got to know where they run to because sometimes they'll run to a secondary point. Sometimes they'll actually just relate to where the old bank line was when the water came all the way up. But it's just trying to find that happy spot of where to think about where that fish is going to be when the water fluctuates a lot.
yeah, for sure. And our lakes around here, if they're pulling water, they don't want to be on the bank. And I think that's how most of these, highland reservoirs are. They don't want to be on the if they're pulling. Now you get on the Tennessee River, they're going to be. They love the current. They say out there, so it's different. I mean, we don't like at least our smaller lakes. Current is the worst thing you can possibly have. So we don't like it, but we like rising water where it's coming up. So they pull off different ways, but it's you got to just follow which way it's going to be, and I don't want to overthink that. I think right now we're trying to overcomplicate what I want to say to add to what you said, but you kind of covered it. There can be a lot of different places. They may stay on the old bank line. I've heard a lot of that at, different lakes, but especially like Cave Run kind of has some huge fluctuations at that lake. But like they all do, but it's the flood control is the number one priority, and it kind of got in my head because I'm used to that. Just like last weekend, I mean, it was that lake. It had flooded up to be full pool, and I thought this is going to be awesome. I'm going to finally get it. This is how I want it to be, and they dropped it 3 foot during and I was like, well, these fish aren't going to be on the bank because they're not around here, and they weren't on the bank, but the bigger lake, it didn't affect it as like it does at home, at least to me. So I don't know. It just changed how I look at things because I know if I'm fishing around here and they're pulling water, I might as well go to the house, arguably,
Yeah,
if they're pulling
exactly.
water around here. I mean, it's tough. So um, it got in my head a little bit too much about trying to find shallower fish. I just don't believe it whenever the lake is pulling, at least not around here.
I know for the most part, kind of a rule of thumb, when the water's coming up, the fish are going to come with it. They like to explore, especially if it gets up in flooded weeds or bushes or something. And that's where you've really got to get up in there with them, get shallow. But as soon as you watch that water level start to flip and start to drop, that's when those fish, they don't like falling water. So they're either going to back off, relate to where that old bank line was, find that secondary point. But the thing of it is, they're not just going to up and take off and run to the other end of the lake because the water's falling. Bass don't move that much.
Yeah, they're just going to pull off somewhere like if they're up in that flooded cover, you kind of want to be pulling a little bit to pull down the edge of it, and different things like that. But we don't. it definitely the water levels are very key to what you're doing in the springtime. Make sure you're staying up on it and see what the trend is, if it's rising or if it's falling or if it's stable. Um, I think you're good if it's stable or rising. If it's falling, you are going to have to get a little bit creative in my book. So.
Air temperature is something that's huge starting in March. You start getting some of those warming days. The days are getting longer, so we don't get some of those super cool nights that we've been having in January and February, which helps maintain some of that water temperature. But finding some water temperatures that maybe jumps up 3-4 degrees and then stabilizes, that's big for fish to whenever they make them bite here in the spring.
Yeah, somebody told me an old saying before: if you get 3 nights in a row above 50 degrees, that's enough for them to move up finally. And they can. We've talked about wintertime fishing. Sometimes they can be up whenever, but that's a rule of thumb that I've kind of kept in my head. And one I found: if I hear frogs chirping, and that's about the same scenario. If I hear frogs, singing, there's going to be fish shallow. So I, definitely think about the air temperatures, but and you got to see what's doing the water. One day of it, or just a couple of days of it being really hot, that's only warming up like this much of the water column. I can't even do it on here. A few feet. You got to think if it's those fish have been down there in the deep water, they're not going to feel that yet. And what do they do if it is sunny? And you see those rise up and just lay right in that water where that sunlight's penetrating. I just like they're baking their eggs. Those big females, they just lay right there. That's why jerk baits are such a great thing this time of year because they just want to rise up in that water and just soak in that sun and enjoy it. So I don't know that all the perfect science on what's happening there, but I definitely think that the water level, the temperature, you got to make sure. It might say you might be, oh wow, I found 58-degree water or 62-degree water today, but when I started the day, it was 47 or 52 or whatever it might have been. And it's like, yeah, well, that's what it is. Only that top layer where your transducer is hitting is what you'll see. Sometimes your transducer from the back of your boat is actually saying it's warmer than the troll motor because the troll motor's down an extra foot. That's something you got to consider too. That's going to be like, well, don't get too carried away with what that number's saying, in my opinion, later in the day because they have to take some time to adjust to that.
Without a doubt. Well, and it's something as the weather starts to warm and we can start getting out on the water here pretty soon. That's what we'll be able to do is get out, actually break these things down on the water rather than just sitting here talking about it. But unfortunately, where we live, we're kind of handcuffed by the weather. Mother Nature's not playing very friendly for the moment. But crazy, we had some places had 3 to 4 inches of snow Friday night, and we're going to be in 65 by Wednesday. So that's the area that we live here in this wonderful world.
Yeah, I've seen some people though on Facebook and Instagram. I've seen them catching them. So people have been catching a few. I don't know what all they're doing yet, but I've seen some fish catches. If you're around here and you've got tag into the show, show us your fish catches and make sure we get to kind of put that out there. And I'm excited to actually do some stuff on the water and make it a little bit more than just hearing us talk forever about what we wish we were doing right now.
Absolutely. There's our social media stuff on Twitter. He's at Coach Eferg12. I'm at Collier SC Live. We're on YouTube at Casting with the Coaches. There's our email address, cwtcfishing@gmail.com. Send us a picture. Tell us where you caught it, how big the fish is. We'd love to put it in on the show. And then, of course, hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up if you see something you like. Hit that bell each time we put stuff out. Right on cue, there's my silly dog that's always yapping whenever I try to do the show. My cat's not been meowing, so I guess I'm 1 for 2.
That's a good thing.
Coach, it's good to hear about your tournament. It was fun watching you. It was kind of along the way. One thing that I want to ask about, how was it fishing against Bass Track? Were you able to monitor Bass Track to see where you were, or was it just something you put your information in and that's all you got?
To be honest with you, I read the rules and I noticed you weren't supposed to get information, and I was nervous that if I looked at it, I'd have been breaking the rules. So I don't know. I never looked at it during the day, so I don't know how I was doing. So I can't say. But you got like a text link, and you could sign up and update what you did, and so I did that just because I had a bunch of people saying, "Hey, keep me updated on what you're doing at home." I'm like, "Well, I can't talk to you during the day," but so I made sure to try to do the Bass Track, and it was cool. I gotta say, I was doing it. But that's when my wife was following it like closely, and she told me she's on the final day. I was like, I'm gonna figure it out. Blah blah blah. I was pumped up, ready to go fish, and I shot up to like 34th, right off the back. So I caught my first limit like really quick, and she's like, "Oh my gosh!" She's like, "I've never been more stressed and excited watching you." I'm like, "Yeah." Well, that's when the front blew through that afternoon, and I mean, the Kendi who won, he talked. He said 4 of the fish he weighed in that day, he caught in, after that started. So that was after I even weighed in. So, that was interesting how the tournament start. 6:45. First flight in was 2:45. 8 hours. But a few hours later, and then I was the last flight the first day, and I got in at 5:35. That's 3 extra hours, and it did not take us 3 hours to get. It's all because of fish care, and I get that, and it evens itself out. It really does. So I think they do a great job in a multi-day tournament doing that. But that's a lot of if you time the right day on getting the last flight or whatever, that's a big deal. And I mean, I'm making excuses, and you can't make excuses, just make it happen. But that was something that I was wanting to get that front. I saw it on the weather coming through all week. I could not wait to. I was hoping I'd get that, and I didn't get it. Just the opposite works. But I had my chances and didn't get it done. So it is what it is.
Coach, we'll break some more stuff down next week. Again, send us that information. There's our Instagrams accounts on our tags there. We'll keep things rolling. Hopefully we'll get on the water here pretty soon.
Planning on it. See you, buddy.
Hey, for Evan Ferguson, I'm James Carter. This is Casting with the Coaches presented by Border Sporting Goods. We'll see you next week.
Spring fishing season is just around the corner, and Border Sporting Goods is your fishing headquarters for rods and reels from G. Loomis, St. Croix, Fenwick, Lewes, Daiwa, Shimano, and Abu Garcia. No matter what species of fish you are targeting, Borders has the perfect setup to make your next trip on the water a success. Borders has baits in every style and size with a wide selection of tackle from Berkley, Strike King, Zoom, Z-Man, Bandit, and many more. Before hitting the water for your next fishing trip, stop by and stock up at Border Sporting Goods, US 60 West in Ashland.